House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Okay, everybody, House to Home coming at you. This issue just is not going away. We're talking, of course, about the nitrate system and decedent properties. Liz Duenas is here, Gina Campos is here, along with John Duenas, her husband, and the principal engineer at Duenas and Associates. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I did a report last week because there was a public hearing downtown at the Guam Congress building. Of course, it was a variety of the senators, and it was brought up that now, in fact, this issue, which kind of stymied and hit a little roadblocks, it will be heard at a future legislative hearing. So that is a good thing. However, there has been at least one argument that has been brought to the table, and it's kind of a two-pronged thing, if I may, and give some context. It's been challenged that there is no scientific grounding to this nitrate system that we've been talking about now for the last month. So one, it's been challenged that there's no scientific merit of the system, and then two, this is just a money grab by the private sector and people involved in the real estate issue. Uncle John and ladies, I would like to give you the floor and say, please address those two points.
I want to bring up the point that Senator Joanne Brown, Barnett, and Sabina Perez, their opinion is that the special interest group, the realtors, that it's all about money. And I think all realtors should be insulted by that comment. This issue has nothing to do with money. This issue has the point that we're focusing on is it allows our local people to build on their property that was given to them either through decedent maps or through parental subdivisions. And that's all it's about, to allow our people, especially during this housing shortage, and the mechanism of how it's about problem solving. How are we going to make it happen? And it's been a process to get to where we are today. People are jumping on the bandwagon, claiming that it's irresponsible, blah, blah, blah. Hey, this has been a 3 to 4 year process that we've been working on solving this problem. And again, I want to emphasize, Gina and I are not making money on this. Realtors aren't making money on this. This is about the ability to build on your property, and that's it. And we are also constituents and voters, and it's really insulting for senators to publicly state that we're all money hungry and greedy, and that this process is about that. So I want to put this out there to those senators. You know, it's election year. You don't treat people like this.
Well, and now as to the point as what is the scientific merit of this system, pro or con, we do have a scientist in the room right now. So John, as an engineer, there is a little bit of history leading up to this point as to go into the science behind this nitrate system.
Right. So I'm a registered engineer. I wouldn't call myself a scientist, you know.
Well, you like math.
But so this whole process started in 2020 when Senator Biscoli basically wanted to wipe out the exemption for the exemptions for parental subdivisions and decedent estates. She wanted to pass a law that says only that a unit can be built with a type 2 facility up in northern Guam over the aquifer, 1 unit per half acre, which is the EPA standard, 1 unit per half acre. And so we worked with them. We saw the problem. We saw the problem developing. We saw a clash between what was done for the community to allow parental subdivisions and decedent estates, the exemptions, and somebody's desire to regulate. So I worked with Guam EPA, Brian Bearden, who was the chief engineer there, Miguel Bordallo, who was the general manager of Waterworks, and Simon Sanchez, who was representing the CCU. And we came up with a bill that authorized the use of an advanced nitrate reducing system. We decided to call it Type 4. So if you hear the terminology Type 4, it refers to the advanced nitrate reducing system.
John was very involved in those discussions. The Water Energy Research Institute.
They were involved later, but I'm going to explain that in their research now. Dr. Abana up at Wary He he made it sort of a lifelong goal to study nitrates in our groundwater, a very noble goal. And he came up with a report that said we cannot distinguish the contribution of leaking sewers and discharges from septic tanks to the increasing nitrates in our groundwater. And he came up with a map of septic tanks and leaching fields in northern Guam, their occurrences, and water wells. Now, water wells is where they sample the concentration of nitrates. So they're depending on extracting water from water wells. There are water wells that are hot wells with very high nitrate concentration. I looked at his map. I saw a lot of anomalies. There is no, I would say there is no direct correlation, but because wastewater discharged into the ground has nitrates, it will contribute, whether it's a minute amount or a large amount. And let's say a minute amount. Basically, he comes out with a recommendation as such. He says there are two ways to deal with this. You connect people to sewer, and by the way, there are over 2,000 residential units within close proximity to sewer that are still using septic tank and leaching field. If you wanted to eliminate the nitrates coming from these thousands of units, connect them to sewer. Now, maybe the next question is, how are you going to pay for it? But that's a different question. If our groundwater is the most important thing we have up in northern Guam, that to me is the priority. But these advanced nitrate systems have been in use. They're in use in Japan, all over Japan. They're in use in the United States. A company called Fuji Clean. There are other companies that make these, by the way, so there's no recommendation to use Fuji Clean, but Fuji Clean.
Yeah, we referenced, I think it was it micronitrate systems in the state of North Carolina, I believe, ladies. And then last week we talked about some in California as well, or in Texas, I'm sorry. No.
I mean, they're all over.
Yeah.
So in 2021, Sabina Perez, Bisco Lee decided not to run. So this whole thing kind of died when she chose not to run. But then Sabina was elected in 2021, actually 2020, but you know, her term began in 2021. We brought this stuff up to her. She said, let's work on something a little bit more comprehensive. So I had many meetings, discussions, phone calls with Brian Beard and Guam EPA to come up with this legislation. Her chief of staff, George Lujan, participated, and we came up with legislation, recommended legislation that Sabina was supposed to introduce. But then she had to run again. She kind of put a pause to that, ran and won, and then promptly forgot about the whole thing. We brought it up to her in 2022. We told her that, hey, we need to get this going. She said, you know, it's in my committee, and she had no intention of moving it. Remember that?
Yeah.
No intention of moving it. So it came around to this legislative year. We kind of were looking around which senator down in the legislature could actually help us, because Sabina had no intention of introducing this thing. Chris Duane has volunteered. He said there are ways to get this on the floor. And so he went through that process. And you saw the results during the Rules Committee meeting. The point was made by Joanne Brown and by Sabina. There is no committee report. You know who writes the committee report? Sabina. So if she never writes one and never issues it, puts it online as Senator Duane has wanted to do, then it would never happen. But there was a process, and it came to the Rules Committee. Now it's on the floor.
Okay, so again, with respect to the challenge about science, there has been some documented evidence and reports and meetings that have been had, and it was in agreement with more than one party from, I guess, the organizations for whom you would expect their opinion would carry like a lot of weight about the scientific narrative.
That's correct. There is something I need to point out, that throughout the whole process, there was an example on Guam of a nitrate system being used. data collected, submitted to Weary. It was David Damian. Actually, the system itself is being used by our office manager and a part owner of our company, Anne Marie Damian Cruz. She uses the system and she's been using it since it was installed a decade ago. And it's working. So it's a perfect example. It works on Guam. It's in Jigo over the groundwater protection zone.
So if you want to consider that like a little micro experiment, I mean, for what it's worth, there is that evidence.
They were trying to qualify that as a mini experiment, but for some reason, just bottled up at Weary.
Okay, well,
Yes.
okay, I want to bring in Gina right now, because I know, Gina, you've been chomping at the bit to weigh in on this. What thoughts do you have?
Well, Jason, one of the comments that I heard when I was there at that committee meeting was, you know, because we brought up that this system, you know, this family has been trying to get this system approved for the last 10 years, and Weary has been studying this system. And what I was told was, well, it's only one system. So how are we going to get data if it's just one? Well, how are you going to get data if you don't allow the system to, you know, right now we have septic tanks, and the thing that is major for me
The big
is,
catch 22, yeah. How do you get data without a system? How do you get a system without data?
Oh, you look at
Yeah,
other
and
locations, Jason. The millions in use. It's in use. A million locations. So hey,
And the point is, it's been in use even in Japan and all over, to the degree that the results of the system is like drinking water. And Gina,
I wouldn't go that
yeah,
far.
but some people use it for irrigation.
I mean, there are
could use it
some
for-
that you could
There's
buy
some.
a much better quality system that
Correct.
could produce. But here's the thing that here is, you know, one of the other comments that was brought up with one of the senators, and, you know, people have been sending it to me and Liz, is that, you know, there are special interest groups that are showing up because they're motivated by the profit margin, the money that is involved. Well, I'm going to tell you who our special interests are, because yes, I guess I better buy a t-shirt that says special interests. Yeah, they've got names. I can tell you who they are. And that's why we're showing up. Liz and I will make more money staying in our office and focusing on our work. But our special interest people, they want us to go down there and back them up, because here's the biggest, this is why we all got involved in this. This is only affecting parental, not even parental. What is going on is only affecting decedent landowners, because parental landowners currently right now, and I don't know how long it's going to hold, they can get a building permit for their property. People who receive their property as a decree from the court, you went through probate and you got your map from the court, you are the one that is unable to use your property, because EPA is saying that the exemption doesn't apply to you, even though we've read the law. And it has always, until 2018, when Captain Bearden became chief engineer at EPA, it had always been observed that if you're a decedent landowner, you can have your property subdivided based on the law, because you can't subdivide if it's not based on the law. And then you get your map. So basically, the reason we're showing up is because these people are the only ones that are not being allowed to build on their property. So we're there to say, listen, guys, if you don't like type 4, so this message is really for Sabina Perez and Chris Barnett and Therese and Speaker Terlahi and maybe even Joanne Brown. If you don't like this type 4 system that John and the other experts are trying to promote so these families can use their property, then by golly, give them an alternative. Because Sabina Perez, I'm sure you've been studying this since 2020 when we approached you, when this came up. So you must have an alternative, another solution that you've come up with to help the people of Guam, because this isn't for subdivision. This is not for developers. This is just for parental subdivisions and decedent estate.
Okay, let me, that's a really good point, Gina.
Jason, I wasn't finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you're a developer, this is not going to help you. You're not going to go in and apply for type 4, because the government, when you go through the building permit process for a subdivision, they're not going to allow you to use this. So this is just for mom and pop and me and my children. That's it.
And you
So
know
I
what's
want
happening?
senators to provide something if this is not it.
Okay, real quick, I wanted to piggyback on what Gina was saying because, and John, this is actually for you. If there is in fact, you take behind what's behind, door A and door B, if you are to shift to an alternate solution and everything in terms of like the feasibility study and the scientific investigation and those meetings that have to happen again, what would be the turnaround time, the timetable to do all of those activities? For a
So
completely,
you mean to use it? So,
oh yeah,
so
like
the
if they say we've got another way we want to go.
No, for an
proposed,
alternative, John, to get an alternative, if there is an alternative, if they don't like type 4.
well, what
Jason,
is the alternative? There is
Sure.
no available alternative on the market.
Okay,
It's either connect to sewer, you use type 2, which is the conventional septic tank leaching field, or the type 4, which is the advanced nitrate reducing system. Now, the point I was gonna make was a lot of the owners that are not being allowed to develop because even though they had the exemptions, their only way out of this is to sell their property. And a lot of them are thinking or actually selling their property to selling it because that's the only way they can get value for what their parents, whether deceased or still alive, bequeath to them.
okay, and if I may, I cannot empathize with, I have some property that was passed down to me from my grandfather to my father, to myself, but my family basically it was an unwritten rule that you keep this in the family. If I even thought about like selling it for commercial gain, I could hear Tata yelling at me already from the grave.
Yeah.
That wouldn't even be an option for me.
but
So, yes.
Jason, there are some families who need to sell,
Exactly.
want to sell, and there's no law
no recourse.
against that. But there's no
Yeah,
law
there is a
against
time
that. There's
limit.
no
There's a
time in
5,
that
right? There's a 5-year time limit on parental
for
subdivision.
parental, but
You have
not
to
on
hold it for
development
5
maps,
years
yeah.
and before you can dispose of
But
it.
for the future, this is a threat. This could be a threat to future parental subdivision owners, giving them the ability to build. Because if they take this away from you, who's to say, because that is what the intent was, to even take away the ability to build on parental subdivisions.
The only hope, Jason, is to wait for waterworks to extend sewer into their area. And that takes a lot of capital. And that's why you see very slow progress because it costs a lot of money.
Okay, and just to wrap up, I want what everybody out there watching in TV land and on YouTube didn't see afterwards. I mean, what you saw, like in the story that I did, was there was a literal divide in the Guam Congress Hall between, the people we have here and their colleagues, as Gina said, advocating for those families for whom this issue affects, and then you had the other half, which were advocating for the aquifer and for our water table, like we said. John and ladies, have you guys had any direct FaceTime or any, an audience with some of those people that were opposing the things since that public hearing happened last week?
I actually I did. I passed out after that meeting. I did pass out my card to some of the members that were there in opposition because this is how I feel. I really feel strongly that we're not on opposite ends. We all want the same thing. For anybody who thinks that John and Liz and myself are advocating for this system because we don't care about the water table, that is that is misinformation. We want to protect the water, but we also believe that you can protect property owner rights and you could protect the aquifer at the same time. We are that smart that we can figure it out. This
And
is
to
not
honor-
one or the other.
Also to honor the exemptions that were created for the community, for parents and for those that have passed away but have bequeathed their properties to their.
Liz, have you been able to talk to anybody from the people that were on the other
Well,
side of the
I
Congress, either on the
invited-
phone or you ran into them at like Payless or anything?
No, I invited, I think it was Angela Paris, who was vehemently
Sa-
in an
Santos, yeah.
argument, or Santos with John, so I kind of parted ways and go, hey, despacio sa familia, let's calm this down and let's talk about it. And I invited her to come into the office so we can talk. I have not seen her yet, but I will reach out to her to come in so we can explain. Because I think some of the activists they don't have all the facts. And it's all about information and not misinformation. I think they're fed information that is not accurate. So we want to correct that. We want to make sure people are aware that these are the facts.
And
But
I'm
I
a
believe-
reporter, so I really want to understand what, exactly where they're coming from too, and where, what they're trying to do.
17537 on the floor is gonna happen. It's gonna happen very
This
soon.
month,
There you go. Okay,
this month, right,
The
John?
battleground's gonna be on the session floor.
Floor.
okay.
And
So
we
you,
invite-
and
We want to invite the people to come if you've been denied permits, or if your
You have an
intent, if you have an interest, but hey, we all have an interest. If your intent is to cut up your property to give your kids, and then your children will be denied a building permit, and that's their intent, you guys have to show up. You don't want this property rights taken away from you.
yeah,
By
so
the
we do
way-
want to encourage people to come down and, at least be there in terms of physical presence if you don't plan on speaking. And I would recommend, maybe you're going to have to park at the Guam Museum, not in front of like Cathedral, because it's probably going to be really, really packed. But there are a lot of people who feel that, obviously, I mean, the serious point is there are a lot of people on both sides of the argument who feel very, very strongly about this long-standing issue.
By the way, a type 4 system is gonna cost more than a conventional septic tank and leaching field. But it's something that gives you an option to use to develop your property.
It's a
And the
solution.
more the system gets in use, the more competition there is in that type 4 market, that will drive prices down.
Okay. So if we don't see you guys at session and everything, if you should happen to have, like an audience, with some of those other parties and everything like that, just give me a call. Maybe we'll do a special bonus episode because there's a lot of people who've come up to me and said, wow, I never realized the issue, and the Instagram post we made. People were like, they didn't even realize this was going on.
You interviewed that gentleman that was so emotional,
Pete Pangilinan from Again.
built on his property.
Yeah. And it's,
Well, you know what? I just
he
want to
was
say.
was
Mr.
basically saying the
Pangilinan,
inability to build on his property is what's keeping him from retiring.
But I want to reach out to Mr. Pangilinan, and if he sees this show, can you please contact us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So John and Liz Duenas and Gina Campos continuing to give their opinion and their participation in this issue. And this thing's there. We are moving forward like a little bit, but the conversation continues. So everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Real